Yeah, absolutely. I mean, more and more people are getting into Airbnb. People are figuring out that this is a way to make some money. So the number of listings skyrocketed in the last year.
This is the Money Seed Podcast, where we discuss all things investing, plain and simple, the way it should be. Please remember, this show is for educational and entertainment purposes only and is not intended to be investment advice. Welcome back to the Money Seed Podcast. Today, my guest is Mark Krikke. Mark is our first Canadian guest on the show and the first Airbnb investor on the show. And as many of you know, it's no secret, I am a Canadian as well, even though I've lived here in the US now for about 7 years. I did live in Canada for quite a number of years. Mark is based out of Hamilton, Ontario. I grew up in Windsor, Ontario, so I know the area very well. Those two cities are only about 3 hours apart. Mark, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me.
Mark, I love your story. You guys got into Airbnb a few years ago. Now you're scaling. You're looking to expand. You're looking to expand into the US as well. I'd love to speak to you about what's it like to run Airbnbs in Canada, what is attracting you to the American market. You recently published a book called You, Me, and Airbnb, and I'm excited to learn more about the book and what our listeners can learn from the book. But first, let's start off with how you got into real estate.
Yeah, so really our entry into real estate. So this is the story of myself and my wife. Right, she's not on the podcast here tonight, but it's definitely our story. So it started with just us purchasing a home together. So that would have been 2012. I think 2012 in Hamilton, Ontario. I had one criteria, is that the home had to have a basement apartment. So depending on where your listeners are. They may not even have basements, but in Canada, we got frost. We build basements. And it's very common, especially in Hamilton where we're at, to have basement apartments. And you rent them out. So that wasn't our, we weren't looking to be real estate investors at the time. It was just we were getting married and getting a house. So that's kind of what you do, right? Get married, Absolutely. Have a house, have kids. So, and I was kind of starting over as well. And we got the house, had the basement apartment in it, rented it out long-term, had a couple tenants. One was good, one was terrible. We also had discovered Airbnb at the time because we like to travel, and started using Airbnb for all of our accommodations personally when we traveled. So we got back from a trip and I was like, you know what? We had the long-term tenant leave, and we had to clean all the garbage out and all that stuff. And I'm like, honey, let's just try Airbnb. I know nobody else is doing it. It's new, and it was probably 2013, 2014, I think. So it was still fairly new in Canada. I mean, fairly new overall, but Canada, we're always behind the States in adopting new business models. So we gave it a try, and it was awesome, right? My wife was just like, well, I don't know, as long as we can cover what we would get with long-term rent. And once we started, we never looked back. And it was just, a pokey little basement apartment. And that was kind of at the time where you could just have a bed and some furniture and people would come and stay and be happy, right? The game has changed dramatically now. But
So Mark, let's get back to the time when you bought that house. So it sounds like it was roughly 10 years ago. When you bought the house, was the basement apartment already finished, and was it a legal apartment already done?
So it was an occupied apartment.
Okay.
So also pretty common for basement apartments in our city, anyways, not to be legal. They're generally fit for occupation, but people just never went to the trouble of getting permits.
Yeah, so I got an interesting story about that, because the zoning bylaws change from city to city on what constitutes a legal basement apartment, because so many houses in that area have basements and have basement apartments. And so I own one property in Canada at the moment. It's in Guelph, which is roughly about an hour from you. Yep. And I bought that property in 2015 because at the time I was living in Canada. I bought that house for my family, and I had the exact same idea. I said, I want a house where I can turn the basement into its own its own apartment, right? And so when I bought that house, the basement was like, this is it. It's perfect. The house was a back split. It had a side entrance, right? So I'm like, okay, I got my 2 entrances, which are required for the basement apartment. The windows were big enough to crawl out of because it was a back split. I'm like, check. It's got its own bathroom down there. Check. This is looking good. And I didn't really check all the city requirements. And so as it turns out, the city has all kinds of extra requirements in Guelph, such as like the driveway has to have enough space for an extra vehicle, so you don't take up street parking, and then the drywall has to be like certain thickness and like fire rating, and it had like all kinds of these really strange restrictions that I never anticipated. And so as it turns out, I was never able to turn that into a legal apartment, and so I never was able to rent it out. I did get some revenue from it for a time because we only lived in it for about a year before we moved here, and for that year, my wife was at home with our second daughter, who was like 2 years old at the time, and we got connected with this organization that takes Chinese high school students and brings them to Canada, right? And so they need homes, and so we signed up, and we were basically offering room and board to a Chinese high school student, and so we were able to generate revenue from the extra bedroom in the basement, but we were never able to get it into an apartment. So I'm glad that by the time you bought your house, it sounds like most of those issues were resolved when you got the house, and you were able to take that into an apartment and run with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it wasn't the whole basement either, right? It was like, I'm actually in it right now. We don't rent it out anymore. It's a growing family, but yeah, like a small apartment, right? 1 bedroom, a little living room with a shared kitchen, and the other half of the basement was unfinished at the time. But like per square foot, it's probably the best earner we've ever had, whether we've owned or managed. It was just incredible.
Yeah. And that is such a great way to get into real estate, is renting out the extra bedroom or the extra apartment in your house. It's almost risk-free. It's a great way to start to understand the business. So it was a long-term rental, the long-term tenant moved out, and then you said, hey, why not start Airbnb? And so tell me a little bit more about that adventure. Because obviously it was a bit of a learning curve, I imagine, right? From listing to furnishing the apartment to the cleaning. Like how did that whole learning curve go?
Yeah, so that was as we went, right? Like as I mentioned, it was almost a bit of the Wild West initially at that time, right? 2014 or so, where the requirements weren't very high to have a place that would get rented. Now, if we're starting out, it would be a different story if we were starting from scratch. But at the time, it was just, you take some pictures, make a listing with Airbnb, put it up, and people came, and, we met people from all over the world. So as we hosted, we kind of learned how, what kind of guests to look for, what settings to have, how important cleaning was. And that's something I talk about in the book too, which is, it seems like a minor detail, but it is probably the top thing that hosts stumble on, is not having a clean place. And we could talk more about that, but my wife basically ran it, right? We were both working actually. So we've got 4 kids at home now, under 8. So at that time we started having kids, and she was a nurse, so she had mat leaves and things, so she was able to do a little bit more work with the Airbnb. But I didn't do too much other than any of the handyman stuff. She took care of the cleaning and most of the booking and that kind of stuff. So
and I imagine
it's trial and error.
Yeah, and I imagine if it's in your house, right? It's a basement apartment in your home. So it's fairly accessible. If you ever need to run down there and fix something, you just go down there and fix it. I guess, when did managing the Airbnb properties become more challenging? Because at some point you got another property, I believe it was a duplex, et cetera, and you started to grow. How did you guys manage like the cleaning and the fixes and everything else with like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 properties? At what point do you say this is too much, man? Like I gotta build a team.
So on the handyman side of it, fixing things, I still take care of most of that, unless it's something if it's for a client and it's like a licensed thing, like a electrician, I'll have somebody come in just for liability reasons. Initially I did all of my own stuff. So on that side of it, as long as you make sure the property's in good shape before you list it and put it out there, then it's fairly easy to do the upkeep, right? Especially if you have a little bit of background in handyman type stuff or contracting. So the cleaning though is where we really hit the roadblock, right? It was just the one apartment was a lot of cleaning. Then we added 2 more of our own, and it was just overwhelming. And I'd been telling my wife for some time, like, just get some cleaners, get some help, right? You can't, as the laundry was the biggest issue, and remains probably one of the biggest issues. So eventually she caved, and we got cleaners to help out, which was great. Because even just running 3 Airbnbs, it's not a lot, but if you're doing short stays, it's a ton of work, right? It's a full-time thing. And even when she was at home, she eventually retired from nursing and stayed home full-time with the kids. But yeah, being home with the kids is a full-time job, and then trying to run 3 Airbnbs, right? So I had started my own business at the time, so I was fairly busy, but yeah, I became more and more involved. And then eventually I thought, you know what? We can't really buy a lot more properties because we're self-employed. So in Canada, trying to get to qualify for mortgages is pretty tough when you're self-employed. We'd managed to get the second place, and we've got a pre-construction condo that we're waiting on. It'll be a few years out, but I knew we probably weren't going to be able to get very far after that, right? The challenge is income. So if you're self-employed, you can either have high income and pay tons of taxes, or have a lower income on paper, use your deductions, but then it looks like you're making no money, so lenders won't touch you. So I thought, how can we get a bigger piece of the pie, especially with short-term rentals? And the answer to that was to do property management and co-host other Airbnbs. So we started that in the midst of the pandemic. I think my wife was 9 months pregnant when we got it rolling, and our first showing, she went into labor, so she called and rescheduled. And
I'm sorry, I'm in labor at the moment.
That is exactly what she said. So the guests were understanding, and we got that taken care of. But that's kind of where we went from there. So yeah, after Mark,
if you don't mind, sorry, I got to stop you right there, because I think this is super interesting. So it sounds like you have 3 doors that you own yourself and you're managing. And then it sounds like you are finding investors who are also investing in your area. So I imagine everything you're managing is in the Hamilton area. So then you have a wealthy investor coming in from, I'm guessing, Toronto or Montreal or somewhere, and they say, I want to buy a property in Hamilton, rent it as an Airbnb, and then you basically run that entire listing for them.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So yeah, some of it has been just organic word of mouth growth as well, where it's someone we know and they were moving out of the country, and they're like, well, hey, I don't want to sell the house because I might be coming back. I don't know. So if you don't know what's the answer, you can get a long-term renter in there, but that's that can be a bit of a pain to get them out. If you come back, you can do it, but it's a bit of work. So a short or a midterm rental is a really good opportunity to make some money while you're out of the country. And then when you come back, it's easy enough to do. So most of them haven't come back yet, and they're enjoying the cash flow. But we have people from the Hamilton area, from the Toronto area, who are buying investment properties. And so we do some long-term as well, but really our passion is the short and the midterm.
And Mark, how do you find some of these investors? You mentioned some of them are friends and family, but how were you able to find some of these other investors that you may not have known personally, and how did you convince them that they should invest with you?
Yeah, so we are members of a local real estate group. So it's called Rockstar Real Estate. It's kind of a cheesy name, but they're marketing experts, and that's part of it, right? It's kind of, they'll give people the hook, but then give them what they need once they're in. So it's a tremendous network of investors, and that's been a pretty good help to us as well. So yeah, just word of mouth through our network, and then also through real estate groups. And then once we put the book out, we've had some more interest as well, right? People calling up. And we're expanding to do remote co-hosting as well. So if somebody's on the other side of the country or in a different country, we could still work with them to do a short-term rental I can't be there, and I'm not going to take out the garbage or fix the drywall, but we can certainly manage the listing side of it and kind of the marketing for the short-term rental.
So currently in the Hamilton area, how many different Airbnb properties do you manage?
So we got 6 right now, and that number fluctuates, right? We do some midterms as well. And so the midterms might be someone who's, it could be somebody going out of the country and coming back. So then that's a listing that's up and then down. And then, or people who have a property and they're not sure if they want to sell it or not. And so in the interim, we'll run it as a midterm rental. So we've taken our 3 listings actually off the market. We needed the space in our house for our basement apartment with a growing family. And just, I finished off the other side of the basement and have a bedroom for a couple of the boys down there. So then I don't want them right next to strangers all the time. Because it's sort of a shared stairway downstairs. And yeah, we need the room. And then, we sold our other property. So that's another couple listings gone. And, we'll end up with one listing in Niagara Falls personally, but our focus is on the States. So it was a bit of a leap of faith, right? We had a cash flowing property here, decided to sell it. And, we've done that. And now we're just working, through all the red tape and so forth to get set up in the States. It's taking a lot longer than I thought, but we're near the end, I think, and hopefully we'll fly down there in the next month or so and look at our first property.
Mark, I definitely want to hear about more of your ideas and future plans in the States, because that's where I'm based and that's where I do my property investing. But let's get back to a little bit more about the actual day-to-day management of your Airbnb properties. When someone says, hey, I manage one Airbnb property or 2 or 3, give us a sense of your work or effort required. So how many hours per day or per week do you allocate for one property?
So it will vary, right? If you're doing short-term rentals and you have stays every, let's say, 3 days, then you're managing guest messages, right? So you can automate that, and we have. So the idea is to put the least amount of effort in as possible. So most of the work is up front, right? Building the listing, setting it up with property management software, working on some direct booking options, which is more of a challenge. Or it's the latest thing that we need to do, right? Instead of just relying on Airbnb and Booking.com, is work on direct booking. But getting the listing set up. So you'll have, maybe a week or 2, depending on what other listings are going on, of a lot of work, right? Could be a full week's work to get a listing set up, depending on how involved the owner is. And then from there, it should be a couple hours a week per Airbnb to just to manage it, right? So that's not counting the turnover time. So we'll have cleaners. I actually call them turnover specialists because they do a lot more than cleaning, right? To do that. And then if there's any repairs, zip down there and fix them. So that might be another hour or 2. So that's kind of the budget for the short term. Like we also do long-term rentals, and they're less work as well. And then the midterm is kind of in the middle. So it's a lot less work, right? So
Mark, what do you consider short-term, midterm, long-term?
Yeah, so long-term would be a year's lease or longer. Short-term would be 30 days or less. And then midterm would be 30 days or longer up to a year. So you can kind of stack them that way. Short-term stays can be drawn out into midterm stays, depending on the purposes of the visit. But usually it's identified up front if somebody's going to need to be there for longer than 30 days. So midterm is really the sweet spot because you won't have, there's much less guest interaction. There's less revenue, right? You're going to give a monthly discount. So let's say 20% as a rough example over what they would be paying nightly. But you're not sending cleaners down there. You're not going down there other than, like, if it's a longer stay, we'll do a quarterly inspection just to make sure everything's on, everything's good, and check the batteries and the smoke detectors, things like that, furnace filters, the same as we would for a long-term property. But does that answer answer what you're looking
Yeah,
for?
absolutely. Yeah. And I imagine that if you have somebody who's staying, let's say 30 days or even longer, they're paying every night of those 30 days. Like even though you give them a slight discount, they're in there every night. So you're generating revenue every day. Typically, when you have a short-term rental, right? I guess that's where you started out with the Airbnbs, the short-term rentals, people coming for weekends or maybe 1 week stays, as they're checking out Niagara Falls and the CN Tower and stuff like that. How many days a month would you be generating revenue typically?
So that depends on how much you want to work. So if we're meeting with an investor, we'll say we always aim for 80% occupancy. So that would be 24 days, usually out of 30 or 31 days in the month. And then if we can get that higher, that's a bonus. What we did with our personal listings was just once somebody checked out was leave that day blocked off. So there would always be vacancy. We've done it plenty of times where, somebody checks out at 11 in the morning would be checkout, and then 4 in the afternoon would be check in. So now you've got 5 hours to get in there and turn the place over. And we did that for years ourselves. And it's just so much work. And once we switched to leaving a day off in between, much, much better, right? A little bit less revenue. And if you're like really focused and you have the time and energy, great, do it. But I would recommend if anybody's self-managing, just leave a day between rentals. Depending on your objectives and your rental style, right? If you're making $100 a night or $200 a night, is it worth it for you to go through all that emotional torture to get the place ready in 4 or 5 hours? Or would you rather give it a day and not have that? So, if you're leaving a day in between bookings, if you have a bunch of 3-night stays, then that adds up over the month, right? And then you're roughly hitting your 80% target there. And that's usually what we build any of our projections on is 80%. And anything above that is a bonus.
Yeah, that's a great segue into that was exactly what I was going to ask you next is let's go through a hypothetical analysis, right? I mean, for those who are not familiar with the area of Southwestern Ontario, house prices in Southwestern Ontario have gone ballistic over the last 10 years, right? So let's say if somebody's trying to get into a single family home somewhere in Hamilton, I mean, you tell me, Mark, how much are they looking at? 600,000, 800,000 for a single family? I mean,
yeah,
just throw a number out there. I mean,
like a standard Hamilton bungalow with a basement, whether it's an apartment or not, you're 700,000 to 800,000.
Right. Okay.
So when we bought houses, were around the $250,000 range, and then so in a 10-year period, they about quadrupled.
Wow.
So we had places in the neighborhood going for over $1 million, and like they were nice, they were done up, renovated, all that stuff. Since then, it has come back down to about the 750 range. Now that's Canadian, right? So that's like it's Northern pesos.
I guess what I'm asking, Mark, is let's say we talk about a property here that you can convert into 2 units, right? Either it's a duplex or either it's a single family with the basement apartments. Let's say you got 2 units in there that you can turn into 2 Airbnbs, and you're investing 750,000 into it. Now you also have to spend, I'm guessing, 20, 30,000 to furnish it, right? And to get it ready for the rental. Can you rent that out for 25 days a month and generate revenue at competitive Airbnb rates? Can it cash flow in today's market in Hamilton?
Yeah. Okay. So Hamilton will be interesting because City Council has just restricted short-term rentals, and that's pending a ratification today, which I haven't heard how that went, but probably it was ratified. So we had lobbied them and went down and spoke, and like they had a public meeting and lots of letters back and forth to not do that. So they ended up restricting it to owner-occupied properties only.
You're like kidding.
Well, they were going to be much more draconian. So at least you can, if you live on a property, you can either rent out the basement, or if you have like an accessory dwelling unit, which are becoming more popular here with house prices, you could like convert your garage into another unit as well. So that would be permissible. And then they did not cap the number of nights. So there was going to be a 120-day cap on the, like how many nights you could rent it out per year. And that's like, that effectively kills an Airbnb because you can't rent it out for 3 months. And then what do you do for the rest of the year, right?
Complete. Yeah, totally. That's shocking that they would pass that. Wow.
It was based on the Toronto model. right? That's pretty well what Toronto did. I think theirs was a 180-day cap. So it's ineffective. Like, it didn't work in Toronto. There's almost as many listings now as when they brought the legislation into force. But that's a whole other topic. So, before this, yes, you could do that. You could have a duplex and you could cash flow. So on that property, you'd probably make, I think around $6,000 a month cash flow. So take your mortgage away from that. That's going back maybe a year and a half, 2 years to, about a year and a half, I think, to the duplex that we had. You could probably push that higher if you really worked the occupancy, but 6,000 would be a fair figure, I think. And then take probably 2,500 to 3,000 out of that for your monthly expenses like mortgage, insurance, sundries, all that. So leaving you a cash flow of about $3,000. So now that would have been at a lower price. So I'm thinking now you would still cash flow, probably at least $2,000, something like that.
That's amazing.
So yeah. So like on the flip side, if you're doing a long-term rental, you're probably not cash flowing. Like, you have to duplex it unless it's an amazing place and you can find like a very certain demographic to rent it for a high price. But even at that, we have some long-term rentals and not bought recently, but it would not cash flow.
And that's exactly my thought as well, right? Is if you're buying a property for $700,000, it's very difficult to rent it out long term for 6 or 7 or 8,000 to generate that positive cash flow. So they're probably not going to cash flow as a long term rental. But it sounds like with Airbnb, I mean, before these laws were passed, you had a legitimate shot at a good cash flow.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, more and more people are getting into Airbnb. Like, people are figuring out that this is a way to make some money. So the number of listings skyrocketed in the last year, actually, and some of that has to do with our landlord tenant board. So just the rent regulations in Hamilton right over the pandemic. A lot of people did not pay rent, and there was the stop paying your rent movement. We're fairly socialist. I mean, well, you're in San Francisco, so we're like California of the North, right? But the landlord tenant board, which has jurisdiction over long-term rentals in Ontario, is effectively broken. They're working on it, but it will take you now, if you have to evict someone, at least 8 months to get a hearing. Right? Maybe longer. So you would have people who were down $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 by the time they were able to get a non-paying tenant out and then fix all the damage. They're just saying it's not worth it. I can't afford to do this again. And so they're going the short-term route. So, and there's more factors than that, but that's a big one. A lot of the people I talk to who are looking at getting into short-term rentals in the area, that's their number one issue. They've either had a bad experience or they know someone who has, and I don't really blame them.
And you know what? That is a perfect segue into the States and why. And so that now it makes perfect sense as to why you're interested in the States. So tell us more about which area of the United States you're considering.
Yeah, so we looked at a few areas. I mean, one of the things I knew that regulations were probably coming to Hamilton, and we had switched to midterm, which isn't really affected by those regulations, but it got me thinking. So this has been in the works for a few years anyways, in our minds. So we looked at Florida. That's kind of the popular one for Canadians, right? And everybody's down there. House prices are, they're cheaper than here, depending on where you are. But I wanted to get more in on the ground in a market. So started looking at Texas, Houston area, San Antonio, a few of these markets. And, one of the criteria was regulation, right? Knowing what was happening here. I wanted to make sure we went to an area that either was regulated already and was kind of friendly to short-term rentals, or was absolutely not regulated and had no intentions of doing it anytime soon. So then we looked at Texas. And the reason for Texas was the interstate migration from a lot of the blue states, right, going down to Texas. Got the biggest interstate migration of any state. And then, there's a few things around Houston I didn't like in some of the restrictions, again, with short-term rentals. So kind of cast the net out a little bit wider and landed up in Tennessee. So Tennessee is, low income, so low house prices, but lots of opportunity. I think there's going to be a lot of spillover from Texas. Like we're seeing that already a little bit from some of the, these states. And we had the same kind of, this isn't original thinking on my part. We had the same thing happen in the run-up of house prices in Canada or in Toronto area where we're from, right? Toronto's the big city close to us. So when house prices went up there, you had people driving till they could afford a place. So Hamilton really, and surrounding Guelph, Guelph had a huge run-up, right?
That's exactly, that was me. I mean, I used to live in Guelph and commute to Toronto. It was like an hour and 20 minutes each way, specifically because I couldn't afford a house in Toronto. So there you go.
Yeah. And it got worse and worse. So people would come here and they would have no issues spending a lot of money on a house in Hamilton, which we thought was ridiculous, but they thought was a deal. So anyways, I can kind of see the same thing happening down south. And we've identified an area that has some good economic growth activity, some very specific opportunities that I think will lend themselves well to either short or midterm rentals. And one of the things we look at if we're going to buy a place or work with investors buying a place is, what's your plan B or your plan C? So we want a short-term rent. If that doesn't work out for some reason, regulation comes in, it slows down like it's very slow right now. What do you do? Well, can you midterm rent? Absolutely, we can do. There's a demand for contractors working in the area. That's probably the biggest one, right? And then if that doesn't work out, could you long-term rent it? And, the answer for us in that area is also yes, but that's an exercise we'll go through with people who are looking at buying a house here as well. Always have a backup plan, right?
Absolutely. And Mark, you mentioned that you might be taking on investors, right? As you look at these properties, when you're speaking to an investor, what kind of a return? I know you can't promise a return, but what kind of a return are you targeting on these properties?
So it's a lot of the people we talk to now already have properties. So, and I do a lot of sort of market reports for people where we conclude that it's just not worth it right now to do it, right? Because and we'll do like a long-term analysis and a short-term analysis. How much could you make in a midterm as well? And so usually we're looking at cap rates in that case. So, with long-term, they're often like revenue neutral. So 0 or 1% or maybe 0.5%, right? So we can, with a short-term rental, again, not in Hamilton anymore, but previous to that, we could look at something in the 4 to 6% range, which is terrible, really. For this area, not bad. But, when I compare it to some of the other markets that I've looked at in the States, no, it's crazy. So, we're looking at cash on cash return as well. And, I'd love to see that in the 20 to 30% range. For initial investment, but up here you would not get that, right? You would be, if you hit 10% on a short-term rental, then you'd be doing okay. Yeah. And that's mainly it's just house prices outpacing income.
And that's how the Canadian market's a little bit different. I gotta tell you a funny story because I think it's high relevant to this discussion. So I own this one property in Canada. It's in Guelph and it's rented out, right? And so I'm living in the States. When it comes time to do my taxes, I have to report that as rental income in America. And I got this cross-border accountant who files my taxes in America and in Canada. And so I got to file taxes on this property in both countries. And in Canada, the Canadian government says, I made a profit, I have to pay taxes. So I got to pay taxes like $800 or something every year to the Canadian government. In America, I get a tax deduction because the American government says I lost money, right? And it's because in the States, we are allowed to take the deduction, right? On a single family, it's a 29.5-year straight line amortization. And so you can deduct the value of the building on the property. But in Canada, you can't. So there's a huge tax advantage in America that real estate investors take advantage of all the time that you can't enjoy in Canada. This is one of the many reasons why. And the other reason is, of course, like you mentioned, that buying the property in America is just generally the houses cost less than they do, say, in Southwestern Ontario. So absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned 20 to 30%. So I haven't gotten an Airbnb yet. My 3 American rental properties that I own or co-own is just straight long-term rental. And our cash on cash return is above 15% on all 3 of them. One is around 20 and one's around 15.
Wow.
And so which is super good for a long-term rental.
Yeah.
And those properties are also they're in the Midwest, right? I can't invest in California for a number of reasons, and I don't want to, but in the Midwest. So we got properties in Wisconsin and in Pennsylvania, great cash on cash returns. And a lot of people in America, when you tell them that, you can do more than 20%, even in America, a lot of people, sometimes they kind of do an eye roll, like, oh yeah, you're trying to pass one over me here. You're trying to scam me. But no, in some real estate investments, especially short-term rentals, if everything works out, it's quite possible to do to get more than 20%. And I'm really glad you brought that up.
Yeah. And speaking of the tax thing, when I found out about 1031 exchanges, that just blew my mind. Right? Because, we sell a property, we got to pay capital gains, unless it's our primary residence. So people get very creative with that primary residence rule. But if you've got a few properties, you can't, when you buy one, you hold on to it, basically. Right. Or you're going to, the way to get the money out is refinance, which, is also done in the States. But here it's that's what you do. You hold on to that property and you refinance. So, and I'm aware that I'm probably going to be giving up equity growth, because the housing market here is crazy. It has dropped down, but looking at all the economic indicators like immigration, housing starts, everything that's happening, we are going to have a shortage for years. We'll always have a shortage, and a big shortage in Ontario, specifically where I'm from. So if you buy a house here, we never count on equity growth, but you can almost guarantee it, over the long haul here. And I know that's not going to be the same in the States. A lot of the properties I've looked at, they were the same price 10 years ago. But if we can get cash flow and then pay, someone else is paying down the mortgage, we're going to build equity anyways. And just working with lenders as well for doing forced depreciation. You can do it here, but it's harder. Talk to a few lenders there and we'll see once we actually do it, but very investor friendly. I'm like, hey, I'm just some guy from Canada, I got an LLC with no history in the States. Will you give me some money? Yeah, sure. The percentage is the only, what the percentage we're going to be paying on the mortgage is the only question, really. It's not, doesn't seem like a question as to whether or not you get financing, which is a huge change from what I'm used to.
Yeah, and here I find that in the United States that there are also a lot of different creative financing options between buyers and sellers, and also hard money, right? There are a lot of investors who will fund you and will give you loans, et cetera, and take equity stakes in your properties. So there's a lot of different ways to come up with the money if you have the right network and et cetera, and you have the right credibility. You can finance a property a million different ways.
Yeah, and that's our plan, is to find something where we can force appreciation. So fixer upper, and they'll give us money to fix it up. So you put your money down, then we'll give you a whole bunch of money, fix it up, and then with a hard money lender, and then in 3-6 months, do a cash out refi. So. And then like cost segregation, bonus depreciation, all that stuff is just like, wow, I love it.
Absolutely. So Mark, tell me about the book. So I think this book came out just a few months ago in late 2022. It's called You, Me, and Airbnb. Tell us about the book.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. The book. I forgot about the book. I was so excited about investing in Tennessee. Excuse me. So initially, we wanted to, I guess, just document our journey a little bit and just tell people about midterm rentals, that there's an opportunity here. Because when we started doing midterm rentals just before the pandemic, I looked around, I couldn't find anything about midterm rentals. So, I thought, hey, there's something here. Maybe we could, educate others, and primarily looking at, kind of rookie investors, right? We don't have a huge portfolio. But we knew that if we could do it, we're just an ordinary couple with no grand ambition to become, real estate moguls. But we kind of stumbled into it and realized, like, hey, if we can do this, so could other people. And especially with the rising cost of life everywhere, but especially where we live, housing prices, everything is just it's tough when you've got a family, right? Especially if you're not both working. So we was kind of documented that. So originally the title was The Stay-at-Home Mom's Guide to Real Estate. And then, we've dealt with a company to help us get the book published, and marketing is important apparently. So, that changed a little bit, but the focus of the book was, just kind of our journey into real estate as the backdrop, and then just a bunch of fundamentals about real estate, because it amazes me. So many people that we talk to just don't really understand real estate as an investment. You dig a little bit deeper and they don't really understand how money works, right? And you explain that money is debt in our society, right? Whether or not you like it, that's how it works. And money is created through debt. And the best way to create debt is through a mortgage. So if you can do that, you're close to the money making machine. So get close to that and you're probably will take care of yourself. So those are some of the topics that we kind of explore in the book, trying to be a little bit friendly, but towards people who are not used to talking like this. So we just talk about real estate concepts, long-term rentals, short-term rentals, midterm rentals as a concept as well. And the idea was just to introduce seasoned investors to midterm rentals as a new category. So, we did that, and I realized later on, like, wow, there's a lot of specific stuff we could have put in as well. So if anybody out there does get the book and they want to learn a little bit more, they can send us an email, and I've got basically another chapter written, and it's just in a PDF, and it's like the nuts and bolts of midterm rentals. Because I didn't realize people would really be hungry for that kind of stuff as well. And you can take things for granted if you're in real estate or if you're into short-term rental, how things work. But, you really got to, somebody's never done it before, it's good to lay it out and just give all those basic details. So that's, I think that kind of encapsulates the book.
Yeah, that's excellent. Getting a little bit more specific on the midterm rentals, when you post or you list, let's say you list a property on Airbnb or VRBO or booking.com, etc., do you have to list it differently if it's a midterm rental? Is there anything that you specifically describe, how you describe the property that would attract a midterm rental seeker?
Yeah, so you would mention it in the title, for example, of the listing, and maybe if you can't do it in the title, you would do it in the description of the that comes right under the title. So month-to-month stays welcome, or midterm. More people are getting familiar with the term midterm. Before, nobody knew what that was. But if you say month-to-month stays, people kind of get that, right? Or longer stays, that kind of thing. When we're approaching a midterm rental, we always set it up with a short-term rental frame of mind. So, excuse me, instead of having that tenant-landlord mindset that you would in a long-term rental, you need to have the host-guest mindset, right? So like somebody's coming to a hotel. So that still applies to a midterm rental, right? It's more of a short-term mentality than a long-term mentality, although it is a longer stay. So everything else you kind of set up the same. You make sure it has most of the amenities that you would in a short-term rental. Likely it's not going to be a vacation rental, so you don't necessarily need a hot tub or kayaks or that kind of thing, right? Where you would in a vacation rental. But if we're talking about like an urban sort of experience, you still have it fully furnished with everything you would need, to cook meals or to hang out in a rainy day, all those, and have a guidebook for the area, all those kind of things. Does that answer?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks, Mark. And a little bit about work-life balance. I think you mentioned you have 4 kids at home. I believe you have a full-time job outside of this Airbnb business, correct?
No, like this is our business. I do have another business as a specialty contractor, so I do audiovisual installations, but I've really scaled that back. Like I had it was a lot bigger in years past, right? But I've just scaled it down to myself and one truck basically, and I'll do that. So I can pick and choose as it comes up, but the focus really is on on the property management business and growing that. So, I mean, there's, writing the book, that took a little bit of time, right? Having the kids around. So we both work in the property management business. So that gives us flexibility to work from home. So generally, if one of us goes out, the other one's at home.
Yeah,
and
I love it, right? So you started about 10 years ago by renting out your basement apartment, and here you are 10 years later, and you are almost entirely focused 100% on this business. Looks like you're pretty much going to be doing this full time in the near future from the sounds of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is full time, right? Everything else is like additional. So, it's absolutely.
Congratulations on being able to finish the book. I think there's a million people who start a book and never finish it. What kind of tips can you give to somebody who is starting a book or thinking about starting a book, and how long did it take you from start to finish?
Okay, well, we'll start with the second part. How long did it take? I think it probably took 2 years from just initial thoughts. And that was like, oh, we should write a book, dear. And I don't know. So we kind of kicked that around for a while, and I wrote a little bit, and then finally found a company, booklaunchers.com, who works with authors to publish their own books. So you maintain independent control, but they do all of the all the copywriting, copy editing, and they'll hook you up with a writing coach and just all the publishing stuff, right? I'm not, despite what we do as a business, I'm not a very details oriented guy. I can do it if I have to, but I just can't stay with it for a long time, right? Even in the business, I'm a macro. I love macroeconomics, and the specifics kind of can drive me nuts, right? And I think maybe that comes out in the book a little bit too. We're focusing on like large external trends, but getting back to the book, like actually writing it was fine, right? Having the time to do it was a little bit tough, but once I had a few hours, I could sit down and pound it out. Because it was a topic that we're passionate about and that we had, we knew about. So it was just a matter of writing that out. And then, honestly, the process of doing all the editing and then starting to work on the promotion and all that kind of stuff, and marketing, that took the longest time. And, was the most challenging, I'd say. So I'm glad I had somebody to walk me through that, because by myself, I don't know. There's guides out there on YouTube. I don't think I would have been able to pull it to fruition. So if I had to do it again, it would be a much shorter time frame. I would write the book and then get it out there. So we'd probably look at like a 6-month kind of time frame, I would think.
I already got the title of your second book figured out, Mark. It's going to be the 10-year journey from house hacking to international real estate investor.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see. Right. I do enjoy writing. So, and I think there's probably value in our transition from the Canadian to the US market. And there's a lot of people we've talked to who are contemplating doing the same thing. So yeah, maybe there's a second one in the works there. You had 2 questions there. One was the timeline. And what was the other one? Just tips on?
Yeah, just tips. Like, what were some of the habits that you had so that you didn't get writer's block for 6 months, or what were some of the habits that you had, and what are some tips you have that forced you to finish this thing?
Really, just a little bit of accountability, I guess. Like, really, there's always a lot of chaos in our house, and it's managed chaos. But when you've got 4 kids under 8 running around, like some are in school, some are not. We've got a very busy church life as well. I'm an elder in my church. So that, that takes up a fair amount of time. And then having another business, managing our own investments, like running our property and then selling property, looking for somewhere else to invest. Like just doing all of that stuff is just it's chaos, and I'm okay with that. So I can just, as long as I get a couple hours, sit down and write. But a lot of people are like, don't work that way. I get that. So from what I understand, you need to sit, like, have a plan every day. And this is something our coach kind of talked to us about as well. And I was like, yeah, that's not going to work for me. But generally a time every day where you sit down and you write. And you have to write. It could be 15 minutes a day, but you have to write, and you kind of start off where you left, like read what you wrote, and then just do another little bit. So it helps to have like a framework for your book. And like, because that's what I did. Like, this chapter will be about this will be about that. And then here's the topics I want to cover, and then kind of fill in the blanks. So have a methodical approach, I think works for a lot of people, but just being consistent. And I think that's true for a lot of things, right? If you want to succeed, you need to have a plan and then work that plan and be consistent with it. Not what I did, but generally that works for most people. And just having like a quiet place to be able to sit and write, and sometimes just clear your head, having some space to do that. Like that, just not an option for us, but that's kind of how we roll.
Well said. Well said. All right, Mark, what's the best way people can reach out to you?
So through our websites, I guess, joyhill.ca is the property management side of things. And markandkirsten.ca is the sort of our personal branding side of things. So where we'll do some, either coaching or consultation, that kind of thing. I will have a podcast out coming out soon with another fella, and that's going to be more of a look at a faith-based approach to real estate investing. So it's there's not a lot out there for, there's a million real estate podcasts out there, but we're going to take a different approach. So when we get that out, we'll have links to that on the websites as well. But yeah, through the website is the best way.
Excellent. Looking forward to it. Mark, thank you very much for joining us. Again, the book is You, Me, and Airbnb. And Mark, thanks very much for taking the time today.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time and being on the show.
Have a good night.
You too.